Imagine you finally have the right wind to hunt your honey hole. So you clear your schedule and hit the woods. With your 25-pound climber strapped to your back, you search the ridgetop for a straight, limbless tree. You find one, but it's just out of bow range from the trail you want to hunt. If that happens once or twice, it's annoying. But when it happens throughout a season, it's enough to convince you there has to be a better way. So you order a hang-on stand and climbing sticks. That cuts 5 pounds from your pack and allows you to hunt less than perfect trees. But over the years, carrying that 20-pound setup gets old too. You want something even lighter. It's a big leap for most tree stand hunters to switch to a tree saddle. You go from sitting to leaning, and instead of facing the woods, you're now facing the tree. Then there's all the hype around saddle hunting. Too many hunters have been burned by jumping on fads in the past, and we don't need another gimmick. I'm OL's gear editor, Scott Einsman, and I get it. I've been there too. But here's the thing. Tree saddles have been around for decades, and hunters have been killing deer out of them long before social media got wind of them. That's why I talked to my buddy, Billy Phillips, who has been hunting from a tree saddle since 2006. Billy gets to hunt year-round in the suburbs of Virginia, which means he spends over 150 days a year in the saddle. So, Billy, you just had kind of a pretty awesome week of Sika deer hunting in Maryland, and you were hunting out of your saddle, right?
Yeah, I mean, exclusively out of a saddle. It was a really, really good week. What we try to do is we try to hunt just before the 3-day muzzleloader season, and it's right around the peak of the rut for Sika deer. And yeah, I went down and I hunted out of a saddle every time. There was a tree stand that we climbed up, but the cameraman was in the tree stand and I was above him in the saddle. It's actually where I shot my stag.
Nice. And I think for people who don't understand Sika deer hunting, shooting a 6-point stag like you did, just to put into perspective on how hard it is to kill, a deer like that with a bow, talk about that a little bit.
Well, they're extremely nocturnal. And, the rut is usually the best time, or arguably the best time to kill any animal, but Sika deer in particular, they, like I said, they're very nocturnal, and they call them the marsh ghost for a reason. They just appear and disappear, and you would think, oh, I know exactly where that thing is. I'm just waiting for them to come out the other side, and they never do. And so they're a very, very elusive creature, and there's a ton of pressure after, all the Meat Eater episodes and Jim Shockey and Jana Waller and all these folks. And I mean, even Tethered put out their video last year, and it just really blew up. And so many people want to go and hunt them. So they're difficult to hunt, and there is a ton of pressure.
Yeah, and spooky animals too. So you kind of have to switch up your stand locations, right? Very
much. I mean, that's actually one of the reasons I use a saddle down there, is because I have to be mobile. They're just like a mature whitetail. You've seen the GPS studies where they will avoid permanent stand locations. Well, on the eastern shore of Maryland, on private land, you're allowed to bait. And everyone down there who has private land has feeders and different feed stations and things. Well, the hinds and whitetails will go to those, especially the whitetail does, but the stags and the whitetail bucks avoid them, and they will skirt downwind of them. They will travel in between them, but it's very rare to see a stag on a feed station. So being mobile is crucial to success there. I try to get in between those areas, finding travel corridors, find Phragmite. That's a common reed for anyone who doesn't know what that is. It's that marsh type of grass that grows 10 or 12 feet tall all over the world. And it's a very invasive species, but the Sika deer just absolutely love it. So I utilize a lot of cameras, cell cameras, and so I don't disturb the areas. And I do have them on some feed stations to see which ones are most active. And then I think about the areas in between those feed stations, the thick cover in between those, and I'll put cameras in there and travel corridors and pinch points to see where the stags are. And that's how I locate them.
That's awesome. And so beyond Sika deer hunting, how, talk a little bit more about how you kind of got into this whole being more mobile, hunting out of a saddle.
Yeah, I read the book, Bow Hunting Pressured Whitetails by John Eberhart. And
great book.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. He's got a ton of knowledge in there, and he talks about hunting out of a saddle. And this was back in 2006 when I read the book, and I knew that mobility was crucial. I'd been hunting out of stationary stands and climbers up until that point, and one of the downfalls of that is just your mobility lacks. Even with a climber, you have to have that telephone pole type tree with no branches. Otherwise, you're trimming branches and sawing things in the dark, and it's not as mobile. So I was looking at that as another option. So I started using a saddle, and I was actually using a saddle and a climbing tree stand at the same time. And then I just quickly realized I'm clunking around and banging around the woods with this climber. It's very specific to the tree that I have to be in. It can't be too big. It can't be too small. And I found that the saddle just gave me more options. And a lot of the places that I hunt are in the suburbs of DC. And lots of small properties, half acre, quarter acre, 1 acre properties just outside of DC in Virginia and Maryland. And when you have a property like that that's hot and there's a lot of deer on it, and the wind is bad for a certain tree, you can't hunt it. But I find with a saddle, I can go and find another tree on the other side of the property or somewhere else downwind that wouldn't be ideal for a lock on, a ladder, or a climber, but you can get into it with a saddle. So I really found that increased my odds when I was trying to hunt these type properties especially.
And when you say a lot of properties, you're talking about like 100 properties.
Dozens and dozens of properties that I have access to hunt. And I have cameras on, I hate to say it, but I have cameras on probably most of them. And so I just go to where the deer are, where they're hottest. And so then I don't have to scout so much. I just rely on the cameras, a lot of cell cameras, and then I go in and I worry about the wind when I get there, or I have an idea, but I just use that to position myself around where the deer are going to be, as opposed to, I can't hunt that property because of the wind. Well, I can probably find another tree that will work out for me. But yeah, I mean, it's dozens of properties that I'm able to hunt. And for the listeners who don't know, there's an extremely high population of whitetail deer in the DC area. There have been times in certain pockets where the population is between 1, 2, 3, upwards of 400 deer per square mile. And biological carrying capacity at its prime is like 15 deer per square mile. So the browse lines and the people's landscaping and car accidents and things like that have really caused the state to focus on getting bow hunters into those suburban areas. And so it's a target rich environment in a lot of instances. So we get a lot of opportunities, many opportunities to hunt deer and have deer in front of us. And they are still deer, even though people say, they're in backyards and, those deer are tame. Well, if you walk through the backyard as a landowner, the deer aren't going to run very far. But if you're in a tree, they know it's danger. And if you shoot one or two, they know there's danger in that area. So you really are hunting wild whitetails.
Yeah. And you get to hunt there pretty much year round, right?
Yeah, I do. We have a very liberal season, and it's from, I think it's the first Saturday in September is the antlerless season. And then That antlerless season runs through the end of April. That's like the last Saturday in April. Then after that, certain landowners are able to get damage permits, whether it's damage from it's from the deer, but on their landscaping or on crops or things like that. And crop damage permits is really where that came from. The state basically already had in place a damage permit or kill permit, as they call them, for farmers. And then these landowners in these residential areas they're extremely affluent areas, they're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into their landscaping just to have it wiped out by the deer. And, if you spend any money, money's important to people. And if they're spending $250,000 on their landscaping, they want it protected. So thinning that herd was able to, you're able to do that in the off season by getting those permits.
Yeah. And the point is that you get to spend more time, in a saddle hunting deer, way more than, the average whitetail hunter who gets, maybe one tag from their state a year. So using a saddle as a hunting tool, we see a lot of hype around them, and, every Instagram celebrity is using a saddle these days, but looking at them as just like a tool, how are you using them to be more successful in the woods?
I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, and for me, it is the mobility. I can go to a property and I can pick the tree that I want to hunt out of. I don't have to say, well, that's the area, now let me find a tree that will work. That is crucial. It's crucial for whether you're just hunting does or you're hunting a very specific mature buck, because those winds can be different. They can shift, and there are little eddies of winds that if you can find exactly where your advantage is from a wind standpoint, then you can pick where you want to be, as opposed to having the tree that best fits your climbing setup. So I think that's number one for me. When I do hunt, for example, Sika deer, or I'm hunting on big land, big public lands or big farms, it's a very lightweight alternative to climbing with a climbing tree stand, or even sticks and a lock on, and definitely more mobile and lighter than a ladder stand and things. So I think that's a secondary advantage that you have, is just a lightweight option to go in, get in quick, get up the tree quickly, and you're set without much noise and fuss. There are many folks who are going and hunting public land now, and we can get into that topic too about the pros and cons of so many people hunting public land. But if you want to be successful going on public land, you have to go where other people are not. Now, sometimes that's right around the corner of the parking area, but most of the times you have to go farther in than everyone else does. So if you have a really light mobile option, you're probably going to be, at least you're going to have an advantage over folks who are carrying in a heavy climber.
We'll be right back after the break.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Just, 2 hours south of you, where I live, it's a completely different hunting area, and I hunt a lot of public land. It's all walking stuff, and, you're walking half mile to a mile, and I did that for a year with sticks and a hang-on, and then when I switched to a saddle, it was just so much nicer, especially with the carbon sticks available now. You don't even notice you're carrying anything. I mean, the camera gear weighs more.
You don't? Yeah, your camera gear literally weighs more than everything else. Your camera gear and water weigh the most. And I think I've talked to people, we were at the ATA show last year, and we were at the Timber Ninja booth, and we were talking to guys, and they were like, well, we don't have to be that lightweight. Your climber, I have a climber that only weighs, 13 pounds with everything on it. And that's true. But
right,
your they're thinking about walking in and walking out. What if you're dragging a deer?
Yeah.
What if you're dragging a 200-pound buck or something? Then the ounces matter. And to me, that's really important when I'm back deep in the swamps, deep in the marshes for sika deer, when I have to take them out a really long way. And they're not a really big critter, you know. A really big stag, maybe 100 pounds. And, you know, but still dragging that through the marsh, it's a real challenge. So I'd like to be as lightweight as I can, especially in those instances.
Yeah. And for me, it's a lot faster and quieter.
Mm-hmm.
Like this year, you and I and Josh, we tested climbing tree stands as well as hang-ons this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an interesting thing for us to do because we've all been hunting on a saddle for a while, and it's been a long time since we've hung a climber. And just like having to think about what tree we're going to go in, and then noticing the noise even of, you know, the best climbers out there, it was eye-opening. There is a clink and a clank that goes into it. Yeah.
And sure, you can definitely quiet them down with certain things. And, you know, your even climbing sticks with a saddle you can get a little clink and clank in there. With a little practice and a few small DIY, you know, tricks and tips, you can really silent your, or have your gear and your saddle system virtually silent. Yeah, we can talk about a little bit what you do DIY stuff to your saddle gear. It's real simple mods. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny you bring that up. Back, I'd say, it's probably about 10 years ago now, 8 or 10 years ago now, when saddles really started to kind of come on with after, you know, Eberhard came out with that book, people couldn't find saddles. Trophy Line was the only one out there. So people started to, you know, get old Trophy Line saddles, and then there wasn't enough out there. They didn't produce that many, but so many people wanted to get into a saddle. So people were DIYing their own saddles, which I don't recommend. I recommend you go with the manufacturer that's proven and tested. But they were making their own, and that birthed this huge group of people who just turned into these DIY saddle guys. So then when companies like Tethered and you know, Latitude, when they came out with their saddles, it still was geared towards a lot of DIY. So when you get these saddles and you get these sticks and things, you have options to change them. Now, I'm not a huge DIY guy when it comes to modifying gear so much, but I will try to improve it slightly. And the one thing, I'd say the number one tip that I can give anyone if they're going to do anything with DIY would be to quiet every piece of metal that's in your system, whether it's your sticks, whether it's your platform, or even the carabiners and rope men and buckles or anything else you have. And the way that I quiet them down is I use a product called Camo Form tape, and I think it's based off of that athletic tape, not the sticky stuff, but the athletic tape that's stretchy and it adheres to itself but doesn't adhere to anything else. And Camo Form, I'm pretty sure that's the name of it. You can get it on Amazon. It's not that expensive. But I wrap that on my platform, on my sticks, on, you know, my carabiners and rope man, everything. I just coat everything on it. So when metal to metal doesn't happen really anymore, and it deadens sound a ton. The other thing that I do is on my sticks, since a lot of these sticks are super lightweight, they're either titanium or carbon, I fill them with spray foam. And just to give you, any of the listeners, a little advice, when you squirt spray foam in there, it's going to expand a lot more than you think overnight. So if you fill it up, you're going to come in the next day and it's going to be an absolute mess. So I recommend, you know, squirting it down there and maybe letting it sit overnight and seeing how much comes out, and then squirting a little more. Do it over a time period. Don't just fill it all up, because you're gonna have a mess on your hands. But that definitely deadens the sound on things like sticks. And what about the actual saddle? Do you do anything there? On the saddle, no. I do have pouches on my saddle that I keep my tether in. I keep my my calls and other miscellaneous items in another pouch. So I have 2 pouches. My lineman's belt, some folks will put their lineman's belt also into a pouch, but I like to use my pouch for things that are completely loose. I leave my lineman's belt on my saddle at all times, and I daisy chain it to itself, and it shrinks up, and it's really small and doesn't get in the way. So I don't really modify. The only other thing that I do is I got a 3D printed, it's kind of a hook that goes into the Moultrie webbing on my saddle, and it's just this plastic 3D printed hook that when I go up the tree, I can take my platform, put it on that hook, and it hangs off the back, and it doesn't get in the way of my sticks or anything else. I can climb all the way up, and then I just reach back, pull my platform off, put it onto the tree, and I'm in the tree. So that's the other DIY item. But like I said, I'm not one of those people who goes crazy and has retractable pull ropes and things like that. I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, the pouches are incredible for, carrying your tether, carrying your lineman's belt. They allow you to get up the tree in one go, as well as like the hook on the back. They also make like those 3D printed stick quivers.
Yep.
Those are nice too.
They're really, really nice, yeah.
But yeah, you can just run up the tree in one shot. It's so easy. And then you're ready to hunt. Mm-hmm. And then I think once people are in the tree, one of the main concerns people have before they get into saddle hunting is safety and comfort. Mm-hmm. What do you have as far as tips on that?
So the very first thing that I would say is if you want to get into saddle hunting, get into a saddle and get 2 feet off the ground and play with it. Get comfortable in there and find exactly how long your tether needs to be, what the height of your tether needs to be, and the length of your bridge. Now, the tether is the rope that goes around the tree and connects to your saddle. The bridge is the part of the saddle. It's almost like a semicircle of rope that goes from one hip to the other, and that's what your tether will actually attach to through a carabiner. And the adjustments on those, if you're lucky enough to have a saddle that has an adjustable bridge, which I highly recommend, that bridge length makes all the difference in the world. And then the height of your tether. And what I mean by that is you wrap your tether around the tree, and there's a loop on one end, and you pull the tag end through that loop, and that tag end has your carabiner on it, and you hook that to your bridge. Well, the height of your tether, you can put it way up high, way above your head. I remember, in the earlier saddle hunting, a lot of people were putting their tether as high as they possibly could to give them a little bit more comfort. And now I've found that if I keep my tether at about, as it wraps around the tree, just about eyebrow level, maybe slightly above that, I get the best angle for the length of my bridge. But I would highly recommend just going a couple feet off the ground and trying to find your comfort level there. I think when people get into saddle hunting, they are more focused on climbing up the tree than they are with the rest of it. And climbing up the tree takes the most amount of time. But when you really think about it, when you're saddle hunting, where are you spending the most of your time? Climbing up and down or sitting in it? It's definitely sitting in it. So that is the most crucial thing to practice, is exactly how you want to sit in the saddle. Either you sit or you lean against the tree. Find your comfort level there, because the climbing portion is going to come pretty easy once you find your system.
Definitely.
You mentioned safety also. Again, getting low down to the ground. So if you do fall, it's like falling off a sidewalk, but you're not going to fall if you follow the proper protocol. So the very first thing is you put a lineman's belt around the tree, and that connects from one hip to the other, goes all the way around the tree, and it's adjustable for the size of the tree, but then also how far away you are from the tree. And lean back into that thing and make sure that it's secure and you feel safe, that if you lean back, you're not going to fall. And once you feel that you're very secure with that, then you can feel secure then putting your tether on. So let's talk about, you get up onto your platform, You have your lineman's belt around the tree. A lot of people, I think you mentioned this before, it's like the first time you got into a saddle, you're like, man, can I trust this tether? I don't know, I'm going to lean back into this thing. Should I really be doing this? Is it safe?
Yeah, it definitely feels weird leaning backwards up on a tree.
Yeah, it feels really weird. So if you're used to using a lineman's belt, which everyone who goes up a tree, when getting into a lock on or something like that, you should be able to use a lineman's belt. A lineman's belt, you're leaning back into that thing and, down at the ground, put your feet up on the first step and lean back into it. Take your hands totally off the lineman's belt in the tree and lean back into it and get comfortable with that. So once you get up to height and you're standing on your platform and you still have your lineman's belt on, you're connected from the ground all the way up, you make sure you feel comfortable with that lineman's belt, then put your tether on, leaving your lineman's belt on completely. Then you tighten your tether up so it starts to take tension off of your lineman's belt, okay? Then sit down into that and pull that tether and really find that spot where, okay, the tether's locked in, and start to loosen your lineman's belt. Don't take it off, but just loosen it to the point that all of your weight is on your tether. Really sink back into it, put your weight into it, because if you're afraid that the tether's not going to hold you, well, you know that the lineman's belt's going to hold you, and you have 2 points of contact there. You have the tether and the lineman's belt. So really lean back into that tether until you feel secure. Then you could take your lineman's belt off. Now, there have been folks that I've introduced to saddle hunting, and they still felt a little bit nervous up there, just going with the tether. And that's totally fine. You can leave the lineman's belt on the tree also the entire hunt if you want. It may make a little noise when you're moving around the tree, because you can shoot 360 degrees around the tree and swing around the tree and even hide behind it when a deer is on the other side. But if you feel uncomfortable, that is an option for you.
And that's one of the key things about a saddle is you can shoot 360 around a tree.
Yes.
And use the tree as cover pretty much any way the deer want to come in.
Absolutely. And with a saddle, you're facing the tree. And you do have an offside, right? You do have a side that, it's like, oh, I can't shoot over that way. But there, you definitely can. You can shoot 360 degrees around the tree. There's a little bit of foot movement that you have to make. And there's specific ways that you can place your feet to really get all the way around. But with a little bit of practice, it becomes second nature. It really does. Leaning against the tree, using your knees, using your feet, using your platform, you can shoot all the way around. In fact, the hind that I shot was on my offside. It was on my right side, and I'm a right-handed shooter. So, with the platform that I have, I cinched my tether up, so I was closer to the tree. I wasn't leaning so much, and I stood up on my platform, and I just turned, and I had the tether over my shoulder, and I was able to shoot no problem to that side. But there's 3 or 4 different ways that you can shoot to that offside. So it's a real advantage when it comes to where you can shoot around the tree.
Yeah, and to your point, it just takes practice. You have to get used to it. Yes.
And whenever I introduce someone to saddle hunting, I'd go through the staying low on the tree and practicing there. And you also need to go up and down the tree, and you need to hunt with it 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 times. Go up and down the tree and do it, because you're going to find that you get a system. And once you find that system, you get into a rhythm, and you can kind of tweak it and make it more efficient. Once you do that, you will be able to get up a tree faster than you can with a climber, without a doubt. And it's just I think it's a really effective way to hunt. I know some people are kind of hybridizing the saddle hunting with the using sticks and a lock-on tree stand. And in fact, you and I talked about this when we did the the Treestand review. On the one, it was the Summit lock-on.
The dual axis, yeah.
The dual axis, exactly. And how that seat folds down, you can use that. And in fact, when I was testing it, I was using my saddle as a harness. And I got up there and put my tether up above, and I put the seat down, and I said to you, I said, look at this. And I put my knees up against the seat, and it was so comfortable. It was so nice. On the rare occasions that I do hunt tree stands, I have my saddle on, and I still just use my saddle just like I would whether I had a just sticks or a platform that I'm using. Now, I will loosen the tether sometimes and sit down on the seat, but typically I'm using it just like I would use a saddle.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered that, obviously a saddle is way more mobile and lighter, easier to carry in. There's no debating that. You can get up a tree very quickly. You can shoot 360 around it. One of the main cons is obviously there's a learning curve to it.
Mm-hmm.
So who would you say, a saddle is not right for?
I would say a saddle is not right for the guy who goes out and hunts 1 or 2 or 3 times a year. I feel as though the learning curve on it, really, you need to be able to be in it and have your system down. And if you're only hunting a couple times a year, well, then you can have a preset tree stand. As long as it's safe, then you can just slide in and get up there and you're done.
Yeah.
If you're only hunting a couple times a year, you're probably not, maybe you don't have the time, maybe you're really serious about doing it, but you're not one of those guys who's just eaten up with it and has the time to get out there and hunt a lot. If you do hunt a lot, a saddle it's a no-brainer, in my opinion. If you're afraid of the learning curve, it really doesn't take that much effort and time to learn your own system and to do it. But I highly recommend, if you're going to do it, practice with it a few times, get in the tree, get comfortable with it. And if you're not comfortable, if you get up into the tree and you're not comfortable, there are things that you can do to take your comfort level to the next level where you can just sit there for an all-day sit. But back to what you asked, who's it not for? I would say that. Now, I have buddies who are over 300 pounds who use saddles. There are different saddles out there. I know Tethered makes 2 that are larger. One is the Menace and one is the Phantom XL, which I'm not a big guy, but I like the Phantom XL just because it's a little roomier for me. Maybe I got a lot of junk in the trunk, I don't know, but it's a little roomier and it's really super comfortable for me. But I mean, even big guys can get in it, little guys can get in them. I think if you're going to hunt a lot, if you're going to hunt, 10 days a year, then I would definitely get a saddle.
Yeah. And going into a little bit on the different types of saddles out there. So I hunt out of a single panel saddle because I like that. It's very easy to pack. You can pretty much just shove it into a cargo pocket. It's so easy. But then there's also double panels. So if someone's looking to get into a saddle, how do you decide between the two?
That's the biggest issue with trying to buy a saddle, because most of them are direct to consumer. And if you don't have someone who has a single panel and a double panel that you can test out beforehand, you're at the mercy of keyboard warriors online and videos on YouTube that people are just pushing the product that they like the most. And it really is a personal preference. I mean, it's Ford versus Chevy or whatever. I think some folks say, well, it's a comfort thing. This is why I go with X saddle versus Y saddle. But I disagree with that, because I've used a bunch of different saddles, and it's more of the adjustments that you can make on them, and it's also your style of hunting out of a saddle. So some people are leaners, where their feet are down on the platform, and they just almost straight-legged lean back into the saddle the whole time. Some people are sitters, where their weight isn't on their feet, it's more in the saddle, and they're sitting in the saddle like a seat hammock. And different saddles, work a little better for certain people. And really, I can't say one or the other because it also depends on your body type. So that's a big challenge to make a decision on which saddle you want based on the fact that you really can't test them out beforehand. I have, like I said, I've used a bunch. I like simplicity. I like one that has few adjustments. I don't like to have buckles on every single point that I can change every single piece, because then it gets confusing and I end up being less comfortable because I'm always constantly adjusting. I'd rather get into the saddle, find my comfort zone, and then get used to the saddle more than I'm making the saddle get used to me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the same way. I just like, adjustable bridge is a feature that I can't live without.
Absolutely.
Other than that, it just needs to be quiet, and, I don't use leg straps, but those are easy to take off if you don't want them. Yeah,
and hey, if I was a saddle manufacturer, I would say use your leg straps every single time, no matter what. I don't use them. I didn't take mine off. I just keep them hooked and tied up, and I don't use them. Now, arborists, they are trained with their belts and their saddles, if you want to call them that, and they don't typically have leg straps always. A lot of times it's just a belt.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I use my saddle also. But an adjustable bridge is absolutely crucial, because otherwise all you can do is adjust your tether height and length.
Yeah. An ascender is another thing that can't live without, especially just on my lineman's belt. Just going up the tree is so easy than, a Prusik knot or something like that.
Absolutely. And I used Prusik knots for years, and those ascenders, and I have one on my lineman's belt because I can adjust the length of the lineman's belt one-handed, and then also on my tether, same thing. I can adjust the length of that one-handed. Yeah, those ascenders are crucial too. Those are two items, ascenders and an adjustable bridge. I think they are very, very important.
Yeah, and I just had a reminder of a story, kind of speaking back to the safety stuff. I was using, these aren't climbing sticks, they were just an individual step, super lightweight packable step that I won't mention the name of. And I had one kick out on me as I was stepping off the platform, and, pretty much had, a fall, but didn't go anywhere because I had my lineman's belt on and I was still attached to the tether. So I just was able to put my feet down on the tree and then climb back up onto the platform. But I think that was, the first time I ever actually tested how safe a saddle is in a very common situation where, you fall stepping off a platform. Have you ever had anything like that?
I've climbed trees thousands and thousands of times, and in those many, many times that I've climbed, I've had two instances. One, a stick kicked out. Won't mention the name of that. I don't use them anymore anyway. Mm-hmm. And another one, I was all the way at the top on the fourth stick. I was on the very top step on that fourth stick, and I was about to get onto the platform, and the top step broke. It actually folded straight down, and I instantly dropped. Now, I had my lineman's belt on, and it caught, and I didn't go anywhere. But, my heart was absolutely racing, because had I not had my lineman's belt on, or as some people, a lot of times falls happen when you're getting in and out of tree stands, they will detach, and they're not attached to anything. They're just holding on. And had I done that, I would have been on the ground and been injured or killed. So, and the top of that step was pushing 20 feet.
Yeah.
So that's a dangerous situation. So, keeping that lineman's belt and your tether always connected, no matter what, is very important.
For sure. So we've gone over our horror stories, but what about a time when, a saddle has made the difference on killing or not killing?
Countless times. I would say outside of what I touched on before about picking any tree, because that's number one. If I can pick any tree, I can pick the specific kill tree that I need to be in, my odds go up. So outside of that, being able to hide behind the tree when a deer is coming, or you know the direction a deer is going to come from, you face the tree and keep the tree in between you and the deer. And you can kind of, as the deer comes around, you can move around the tree and keep the tree between you and the deer, and it blocks you. You're not silhouetted, if you have a lock-on tree stand or a ladder or a climber, they're stuck there and they're sticking out in some way. And unless you have a tremendous amount of cover, there's some angle that a deer can see you from. But if you can get all the way around the tree and hide behind the tree, you're just a small lump on that tree. So your profile is lessened tremendously. So that is something that I've done countless times. I'll keep the tree in between me and the deer, and I'll let the deer pass me. And as it passes me, I'm at full draw, and I get a great quartering away shot, which arguably a quartering away shot is better than a perfectly broadside shot, in my opinion. And so I'll take that quartering away shot all day over even a broadside shot. And that's an advantage right there. If it came to a specific deer, I would just have to say that it's just one of those situations where I'm able to get into the tree that I want to, as opposed to the area I want to, and then find a tree in that area.
Yeah, that flexibility is absolutely key.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so at this point, let's say someone's sold on the idea of hunting out of a saddle, they're ready to do it. What do they need, and what are some of your final tips for them?
Yeah, I would say the bare essentials are a method to climb the tree, lightweight pair of sticks or a set of sticks. You want anywhere from 3 to 4 sticks, depending on the length of the sticks, and try to get your feet at least 15 to 16, 17 feet, 18 feet in the air. So you need a set of sticks. You need a place to put your feet, whether it's a ring of steps that you can put around the tree, or a platform like I use and a lot of the guys that I know use. You have to have somewhere to put your feet so you can get all the way around the tree easily. And then your saddle, obviously. I think the optional items, like we talked about, are the ascenders, which Rope Man 1 is the ascender that I use, and put one on your tether and on your lineman's belt. But I would say those are the bare essentials. You can add knee pads. Knee pads help when you're in the tree and you're leaning and you want to give your feet or the rest of your body a little bit of a break, and you just bend your knees and put your knees against the tree. And those knee pads, the ones they're kind of harder plastic on the outside and cushioned against your knee, and those make it really comfortable to just lean against the tree whenever you want to. I would also say something to hang your bow with. I use the HYS strap from Tethered. It has a bunch of loops all the way around it. It wraps around the tree, so you can use it on public land. There's no screw-ins or anything like that. And you can just hang hooks off of it and hang all your gear, your backpack, your bow and quiver and whatever else you need to hang off of that. I would say that's the other crucial item you need to have. And a pull rope. I mean, that's important. And I just use a piece of paracord, and I, figure eight, wrap it around my hand, and then it never tangles. So, yeah, I'd say those are the essential items.
Those are the essential items, and I mean, that's exactly my exact saddle kit. So that's really all you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And people have gone down the rabbit hole of, when they climb the tree, they'll have ropes for every one of their sticks, and they pull up, and then they're dealing with 5-6 ropes and things like that. And and then you can go into using a one-stick method where you use aiders and a rope to rappel down out of the tree. And either you can go down a deep rabbit hole, but if you're just getting started, the items that I mentioned will get you started and get you mobile and in a tree and being effective.
Nice. All right, so what about final tips, new saddle hunter?
Yeah, the final tips, I practice, find your system. There are so many resources out there on people's setups and their gear setups, their gear dumps, and their how they climb the tree and their methods. And if you follow one and then modify it to your liking, it's going to be really easy. If you try to look at every different method and try to combine them all, and reinvent the wheel, I think you're going down the wrong path. Find a simple method, and then you can modify from there. If anyone has questions, feel free to reach out to me, on Instagram or Facebook or any other way. And I'd be happy to walk you through my system, my setup, or, maybe help you with an issue that you're having. No problem.
Yeah, it's William_Phillips and the Hang and Hunt podcast, right?
Yeah, Hang and Hunt podcast. You can also find me on Hunt Urban, but definitely practice to keep your learning curve not so steep, and try to follow one method, and don't be afraid to practice a little bit. And if you can do that, then and be patient, you will find that the saddle is a very efficient way to hunt deer, and really to hunt anything. Outside of ducks, maybe. Ducks and geese might be a little bit tough.
Today's episode of the Outdoor Life podcast was hosted by our gear editor, Scott Einsman. It was edited and produced by me, Senior Deputy Editor Natalie Krebs. Music in this episode was composed and performed by Julian Burrill via APM Music. Next week on the podcast, we have our very own shooting editor, John B. Snow, to talk about the biggest myths and misconceptions around deer rifles, cartridges, and shot placement.